often. All right, welcome to Twirl Talk Tuesday this week. I'm Kyle Kaiser, and I was able to nab one of the busiest people on the globe, literally. And, you know, in her calm time of the year, which it's not, in January. So Sandi Wiemers, longtime president of the WBTF, the World Baton Twirling Federation. And now we're morphing into the IBTF, which we'll talk about. I just want to welcome Sandi for taking the time to join us tonight. Thank you, Sandi.
You bet.
So our relationship, Sandi's one of those things that I was a competitor and she was the judge. And then as you crossed the other side of the table, she became one of the mentors and people that I judged with. And then we're going to go on into how she went through the ranks of USTA and then decided to become involved and invested with the WBTF. So let's go back a little bit. Sandi also has sons and lots of grandsons. And so you do have a personal life somewhere along there, right, Sandi?
I do.
You get to see your family. And I do also want to offer that Sandi's a breast cancer survivor. And we think that that's a huge deal. Of course, most of all to her, it's a big deal. But I remember when Sandi was diagnosed. And I remember as you're sitting there with your mentors and you're seeing how they're handling things. And I remember sitting with her, and at the moment she said, you know, this wasn't on my calendar, didn't have it in my books, and this isn't what I planned on, but right now this is my job. And this is what we do. We just tackle it one day at a time. And did you figure that was your mindset the whole way, Sandi?
Yes, it was. It very definitely was. I remember I told, it's a really quite devastating when they tell you, you have cancer. And, you need to come into the office. We need to talk about these things. And I said, I don't have time for this. I think you must have somebody else's records. They said, no, it's you. So.
Well, and like everything else, you were able to navigate it well, and you put it on your docket and you handled it one task at a time. And it was wonderful to see you come out the other side of it and to see you handle it. But you're also the person who's sending emails at 3 a.m. and like, I don't know when you sleep because you're busy with all of this stuff all the time. So let's go to the beginning of, you went through the ranks of USTA, and what prompted your involvement with the WBTF?
Well, I started by serving on the U.S. Technical Committee back in the mid 80s, and along with some very bright and talented young 20-somethings like you and Jeanette and Amby Taylor. And when the technical committee was divided into two working parts, one that worked on the technical components and the rules, and the other was set up with formulating a certified training program for judges. I became the U.S. judges representative to that committee. So that was sort of my first introduction into the WBTF. And so that's kind of how it all started for me.
And who was important to you along the way there that something happening with the sound here? Who was important along the way there to help guide you through the way that the World Baton Twirling Federation worked?
No, I would say the majority of them are, my friends and colleagues here in North America who I worked with, all of us worked tirelessly to advance this sport, and just, all those people that, were all part of this, Ann Bettenbender and Frances Whitley and Dale White, Jackie Stewart, Joyce Dalton, Kathy Forsyth, John Chamberlain, all those people I mentioned earlier, Sandy Rios, and, and our Canadian friends, Maureen Johnson, all of those people that I've worked with, and of course, Paolo DeMarschi from Italy, who's been the WBTF Technical Committee chairperson for all that time.
So did you start out with a long-term plan, or did you just peck away at task after task? Or did you always know you had a long-term plan?
Um, yeah, I think I did. I think sometimes I think everything you do, at least I feel like everything I've done in my life's kind of been by accident. I don't know. I'm kind of a driven kind of person, and when I have see something that I feel like is important, or feel like it's beneficial.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm a little obsessive compulsive in that manner.
I'm like a
So
dog with a bone, as we say.
yeah, kind
Yeah,
of
get on it and go with it. So
right.
there have been so many wonderful historical things that have happened. And I think that the history of the WBTF will be important as we move forward, because we've got to talk about the feeling of, does that mean that the WBTF is going to go away? And like, how do we keep the wonderful things that we've had as we move to the future? Because moving to the future is important, but hanging on to the past is also important. So part of me, let's go backwards to, we talk about the history of twirling. And so when we look at the WBTF now and the IBTF, all these initials. So I want to go ahead and let you explain that in a minute, a little bit down the road. But,
Mhm.
we'd say how far removed we are from the majorette that our grandmothers were. Um, but yet remembering that's important. So how do you reflect on the importance of history with us moving forward?
Well, I think, that was at that time and now's this time, and it's very different now, than it was. I grew up, I grew up in that time, I'm one of those grandmothers, who was part of that era. I think about how, um, I can remember going to a few American Legion Post competitions, and I was the majorette with the hat and the boots and a baton that would resemble a battery ram, today in comparison to today's apparatuses. And so, there were competitions were starting to spring up, but I think, unfortunately, I think a lot of that um, is our past kind of still haunts us, because uh, we're not recognized for it, uh, and our wonderful athletes and high competitive, athletes just are they're not showcased on the mainstream media or sports channels, and so the majority of people out there still view baton twirling as it was back in those days.
Right.
They'll say, "Oh yeah, I used to," I my mom used to do that, or you'll get the finger roll and so forth. So um, I guess many of us have tried to change that image over the years, but it's really going to take recognition, sponsorship, money, and the whole baton twirling village worldwide to make it happen and understand the benefits of doing so.
Well, and I think that change is exponential in everything that we're doing now. So the faster we change, the faster we change. So one of our biggest friends is social media and YouTube and the platform, because it was funny because tonight, even on my Facebook, somebody posted, one of the old time majorettes making this grand entrance into a gathering. And it's valuable. It's valuable that we recognize our history, but it's
Yep,
also more valuable that we move forward from that. So
absolutely it is.
it's interesting. So now let's take that with the WBTF. And if you want to explain a little bit about what the future looks like from the World Baton Twirling Federation, the WFNBTA, the National Baton Twirling Association, and now what's happening with the IBTF. Because I know what some of us are guilty of. When you're involved in the decision-making process and you're involved in the discussions, sometimes the general public doesn't know what's happening and doesn't know what's going on out there. So what could you share to shed light on that?
Well, the IBTF has been in the formative stages now, for several years. We're 8 or 9 years into planning stages of this. It's something that's moves, I would say, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and then 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's a major project to bring 2 historical organizations together and try to make things fit that everybody's happy with. So both the WBTF and the WFNBT are scheduled to hold their last World Championship this summer in August, but unfortunately, the ongoing pandemic and the many problems associated with that will most likely, I think will definitely most likely curtail the last WBTF World Championship, probably until August of 22. It's looking that way. Every day it seems to look more that way. We'll be making that definite decision here by the end of this month. And in that case, the first IBTF World Baton Twirling Championship and Nations Cup that we had planned to take place actually in the beginning of all of this would have happened this summer, is now probably delayed until August of 2023. So, there's more time and more hurdles ahead in many things. But I think the new IBTF World Baton Twirling Championship will hold the traditional baton twirling disciplines that we all know of: solo, 2 and 3 baton, artistic twirl, pair, duet, all the various team and group disciplines, very much like the WBTF's International Cup, with 3 levels of competition. And then in the alternative years following that, it will hold the traditional freestyle championships.
Mm-hmm.
So in that respect, I don't think it really isn't that much different than it was before, but it just involves a few more events that maybe those who don't compete typically in both organizations will have an opportunity to experience if they like. And a lot more involvement. And the beauty of it is we will have 1 world championship, which is most important in moving forward to try to be a part of a recognized sport, and because that is a mandate.
Right. Well, I know when that first time it happened and the IBTF flag came out, I, like several other people, it was pretty emotional, that it felt like it had been my lifetime, like several of us, it's been our lifetime. And I also think that unless you're watching that at what we've seen at the Grand Prix level, you might have a little more trepidation than when you've seen it in the works.
Yes.
And so my statement always is, these kids just want to twirl. There might be an allegiance to an organization or something like that. But once we've brought it together and once you saw that moment, it was like a dream coming true. Mm-hmm. And so the kudos to the people that have worked so tirelessly to make this happen. And I honestly think that the art of negotiation could show some of our politicians the way. When you look at the give and take and the art of how this has all been worked out, that I can't, speak for you, but it feels like there's been a lot of give and take and a lot of negotiation to make things happen.
There has to be, yeah.
And so tell me what we are missing that for the layperson, how did breakdancing make it to the Olympics before we did?
Well, I wish I knew. I think, first of all, they're backed through a sport that's already very, active and involved at that level. So it was easier for them to come in. I think the IOC a lot of times is looking for extreme, exciting kind of sport activity. and they sort of fit that bill. If we can ever get to that point where they'll look at us, they might, see some value in that too. We're
They
pretty
see the bodies flying across the floor, all that exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So what is the we'll get away from some of these nuts and bolts in a little bit, but so
Sure.
what there's been talk about the requirements of what was the standard of what we had to meet to get there. What could you share for the person watching this that wants to be able to explain why we're not there yet? What are some of the steps that we need to get there?
Well, we have to have 40 member countries that have a governance that's established. They have to have, all the very strict rules and regulations that are expected for that. They have to have a startup with following all of the anti-doping policies. All of those things are required inside of there. And I think the thing that is the hardest for us to overcome is that our country members, have to be recognized by their country's highest sporting body authority, whether it's a Ministry of Sports or a National Olympic Committee, or whatever governing body in their country. They have to be recognized inside their country as an official sport. So they have to meet all those protocols.
And do we have many countries that are there?
We have about 12.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that that's exciting to hear, to hear that the people that have been talking have a definite plan and know the things that have to happen to make that happen. And also just to put that in there too. So the other person, you're our co-chair of the IBTF, correct? With Bev Johnson?
She is my vice president, yes.
Vice president. Okay. All right. And so you all have had to do a lot of behind the scenes work to make these committees come together and things. It feels like, from just being a person who receives the information. So let's go back with some of the history of the WBTF, because there's just some wonderful history and stories and performances. And so let's talk about that first, since we're in this sport. Do you, Sandi Wiemers, have some performances that just really stand out as life-changing for you or life-changing for the sport?
Well, I don't know if they're life-changing, but I guess some of my favorites, ones I feel like have been impactful from my perspective. I guess on the women's side, I always felt both Stacy Singer and Annetta Lucero were very impactful performers. On the men's side, Mark Nash in '94, when he received that 10, for that flawless performance of Maria at the World Championship. And of course, Seishi Inagaki and Keisuke Kamada are always impactful and inspiring to watch. Seishi and Shiharu Tashibana, who's been his partner in pairs for many years, was also an excellent performer. In Spain in 2003, I don't know whether you remember this, but the lights went out during their command performance, and they didn't miss a beat. I mean, I was just absolutely flabbergasted at the job that they did. And, it really made me appreciate just how really good they were.
That was a memorable moment. And I used it constantly with my students. So I'm like, listen, are you kidding me? They can do a triple illusion catch inside in the dark. And wasn't it Seishi first that the lights went out, and then Shiharu went and the same thing happened?
Yeah, no, and they didn't miss a beat. It was just amazing. I thought, you've practiced to the point where you can do this in the dark.
Yeah.
It was pretty dark in there.
Yeah. So let's talk about those moments. So we have such memorable moments at the World Championships. So I had asked you about events, but meaning things that have really affected. We know that right now, how ironic that we have waited so long for all of this to happen, and a global pandemic is going to push it even further away.
Oh, I know.
But let's talk about some of the things that have happened at World Championships that were just, they changed the landscape of the championship, or they changed the emotion of it. What is there anything that stands out to you about those years?
Yeah, probably. I think every time we go to Italy or France or somewhere over there, the summer heat and no air conditioning inside those sports halls in Europe is like unbelievable, and I've always admired how tough it was for the athletes and how well most of them handled it. But I also remember some of my judging colleagues succumbing to heat exhaustion and having to be replaced on the panel because it was that bad.
Yeah.
So that's always, those are some memorable things I can think of in that respect. I remember when the U.S. hosted the '97 World Championships in Hawaii. Kathy will laugh about me with this one because it was very last minute because Australia was supposed to host and had to back out in like 6 months before because their facility funding fell through. And so Linda Garland called me and wanted to know if I thought, that we could pull this off somehow. And so Kathy and I go to work and, try to try to get this all figured out. And miraculously, we were able to pull it all together in Honolulu with getting this sports promotion company to assist in sponsoring along with United Airlines. Well, then several of the European federations decided to boycott because they considered it to be commercial now instead of being an amateur event. And that was part of our contract that required everybody to travel on United. So at any rate, it all worked out. Those who didn't come missed out on a great, wonderful championship and a fabulous time, that we had.
Oh, it was a great time. It was one of the best venues ever. And then we have the year that Japan couldn't come because of the earthquake.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, that was in 2011, and that tsunami
Oh, that's right.
was horrific. That devastated thousands of homes and businesses and loss of life. And unfortunately, there were many Japanese members who suffered greatly from that. And of course, they were not able to come. So that was.
Oh, and it changed everything. The heartbeat of the Federation is the connection of all of the countries
It
and
is.
all of the people and the faces. And when part of that heartbeat is gone, it changed everything. And I just remember how sad it felt to just not have them with us. So there was another situation you remember all the years. I never remember these dates and years. But at the Canadian Championship, when the South African contingent was coming.
Yeah. They were new, and they flew into Vancouver with no idea that the competition was in Saskatchewan, which is about 1,000 miles away, and with no plan to get there. So the Canadian Federation, being the wonderful hosts that they were, took it upon themselves to get that team. I don't know, there were probably 25 athletes. They got them there and had to find them housing. It was quite an ordeal.
I think it was some church that stepped up and helped, and then even Starline Baton, because they had drapery rods. They didn't have batons.
No, they didn't even have batons.
Right. And so Starline stepped up to, get them batons. But I think that, again, the heartbeat of the Federation, it's not just about the champions, and it's not just about the World Cup. It's about everything that's happened to get there and all of the hurdles that have been crossed. And I think that that's also a statement on the Federation and the teams, like in Italy, when it was, like you said, hotter than Hades. And these kids were intense outside and no practice area and anything like that. And they adjusted.
Yeah.
They did whatever they had to do. And then there's some amazing, memorable experiences just from like the performances that happen as
Mhm.
part of the festivities.
Mhm.
So, with the growth of the organization, do you feel like the performance quality, have these kids had to become better athletes along the way?
Yes.
And so how do we measure that, or how do we sell that to the general public?
Well, we have to have exposure. You know, the internet and social media has helped, of course, but it has to be more than that as well. We have to get in the mainstream media somehow, and that takes money.
Uh-huh.
And it takes sponsorship, and we can't achieve those things unless we become a recognized sport, which is where I'm coming from with my whole angle with it is that we've sat in the background for all these years. It's time to our athletes and our coaches deserve better.
Mm-hmm.
We're better than that, and I feel really strongly about that.
And so has there been a language barrier over the years, and how has the sport of twirling dealt with that?
um, well, I've watched it get better over the years, because more and more of the countries speak better English. In the sports world, English is the language. So we're the lucky ones.
Right.
I have great admiration for these people who come to these meetings and are judges to take all of these exams, and people I have in the boardroom who don't speak English, and how difficult it is for them. I don't know how they manage.
So how have you, like a country like Croatia and Slovenia, how have they become member organizations, and what was the groundwork that was laid in order to reach out to a country like that?
Well, I'll tell you what, it first started with the internet. When the internet was first out there, they contacted me. Someone there, they had these major ed groups. Major ed groups in Europe are huge.
Okay.
And they had, they'd been on the internet and they started watching twirling. Well, they wanted to learn how to do that.
And did it
So,
take one person? Does that all it takes? Is it one person that kind of drives the force from that country?
yeah, it's a person that's got a real conviction that they want to see something happen.
So
And I think that takes them, along with several other people along with them, that have the drive and have the want to make something happen.
So who are the countries that you think are on the edge? Who do you think are close to being able to be involved in the activity, or who would you like to see in the activity?
Well, speaking of South Africa, okay, they're back now. This has been a journey now. All that happened like 25 years ago. And then they went off the radar screen because the person who was basically running that organization, I think took off with all the money or whatever it was they had, and just sort of left it there.
Okay.
Those kids that were all involved in that program, most, from what my understanding was, were basically orphans, or they're victims of AIDS or violence or something. Well, some of those kids are now adults, and they loved baton twirling, and they started contacting me and telling me that they wanted to revive baton twirling there, and they wanted to get it started, and they're doing a great job.
Wonderful.
So
Well,
I kind of expect to see them, come on to the international scene at some point. It's a long process to get there. What has helped and what has helped Twirling grow basically was when we started the International Cup format competition back in 2004, we started to see growth because it gave that opportunity for lower level countries to come and participate and to see and experience and gain, that type of a mentality to move forward.
Well, and to have a level of success,
Yeah.
that you don't have to be a Japan, a US, a
No.
France, a
Yeah.
Canada, an Italy. So that's really hopeful to me. And
Yeah.
I know that it's the outreach. When you look at how many of us taught abroad or how many the Japanese brought to America, of course, Zoom lessons now are the magic of it, but it's still not like the personal interaction. Now, I
No.
remember being asked to go to South Africa to teach for like 6 weeks, and I knew it was going to be in the dirt. And sometimes it was hard enough to go to Europe and teach. And so,
Oh, yeah.
and that it takes commitment and the energy and enthusiasm to go, I don't care how much I get paid. I don't care, where I am. And so sometimes I think we've marketed ourselves out of being attractive and approachable for some of these countries because there are such high level coaches now that expect much greater things than we did 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that
yeah.
changes. And
None of those countries that are beginning have any money. So if you think you're going to go there and make some money, might as well forget it.
yeah. Yeah, it has to be. Well, I always look at it as my community service and volunteerism.
Exactly.
I also remember having someone reach out to me from like Afghanistan,
Mhm.
and he was looking at doing a pageantry sport arts type things, and he wanted something for girls that they could do within the confines of what they had, and it scared me. I was a young mom. I'm like, I I can't go to a Middle Eastern country right now. And I really regretted that for some, because you look at how we have empowered young people and that opportunity is there for
Mhm.
kids all around the world. So I hope that the IBTF and the WBTF is looking at some of these outreach programs that we're only going to grow by being able to provide coaches to go to different places and programs to do that.
Mhm.
Have you talked about that at all?
Oh, yeah, yeah, and we do that. And I also think that the advent of Zoom and all of this now has made this much easier too, because um, you can teach classes online. You can do that, and yes, they're not as effective, but you can only send someone in to a country for a certain length of time, and then you leave. So you have to have a follow-up plan, and it can't be someone just going there all the time because it doesn't work that way. They can't afford it, and we can't afford to continue to just constantly send someone there. So you have to find those people that have that initiative and have that want to and that drive to want to make something happen that will, go on with it. We have an organization in Pakistan. We have an organization in India. They're pretty successful. They're they're interesting. They're a little different, you know,
Hmm.
but it's tough for them to travel and to come to things. And they're not at that point where they're ready to come to an international event. And in some cases, that's difficult for them to do simply because of the politics that are involved in it. But yeah,
Well, I
no,
know you have been a great advocate, Sandy, of getting our young coaches out there. I personally am grateful to you for the opportunities that you've given me along the way.
hey, they're the future.
Yeah, and there's no way we grow without that.
No,
Um,
absolutely not.
what is one of your best examples of a country that started very small and with little exposure and experience and has really blossomed? Do you have one that stands out to you?
Slovenia.
And what was the secret to their success?
They are very sports minded, very driven mentality kind of people. I think that's a lot of it.
And they have great technique. I think
Yeah.
that that's and so did that technique develop from someone that learned, like, I know that you had gone there and you had sent coaches there. Is that the groundwork of what happened there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Um,
told him from the very beginning, I said, listen, you follow this plan and you build your house right, you'll get there much quicker than anyone else. I
mhm.
said, you have to do it right. And they did.
Yeah. And Kathy, you're always my sample panelist here that I like to get information from. So and you're part of this long history of the World Federation. Can you think of specific examples that are a good role model for other countries and other coaches of like how to build the sport and get the growth out there globally?
You mean other countries that have been successful?
Yeah, and maybe there's a specific program within a country that you've seen that has done it really well.
Well, it seems like different countries are unique in their approach. No one does it like the French. I mean, they teach baton twirling to be successful at freestyle. So you mentioned solo and they don't know what it is. And so and Jean-Michel has often said, the French people are the French people, and they will only do what their mindset is. And so they play into that.
Yeah.
And it's just like Sandi said, there are some countries that through the years with the Olympic movement, or I come from a Slovenian background, and so I remember growing up that my father said he used to go to a gym and they worked out, and this was prior to World War II. So there are countries that have that mindset. The Russian bloc, I think, is like that. And then, there are countries that are just not into physical things. It's more artistic.
Mhm.
So I guess you kind of have to play into what the society there it really will buy into.
Mhm.
Well,
That's a good
part
way-
of my
that's a good way to
feeling
put
with
it.
the French have been incredibly successful. And I remember talking to Jean-Michel when I would go there, and they wanted like, how do you do a solo? And I said, okay, I'm going to do solo in these clinics, and we'll go, here's the beginner class, the intermediate class, the advanced class, and we'll take it like how you make it grow. And I said, but these kids get so bored. And Jean-Michel is like, oh, it's the French. They're always bored. But I also remember, because people speak English doesn't mean they think like us. They think in what is specific to their country and their culture and how they were raised. And so I also remember years ago when we would go and do their freestyles and things like that, until you understood, and I'm using the French as an example because they've been so fabulous at it. The French want to look French. So they'll look at the material and they'll take some creative twists with it, but yet they want to look French. Whereas we in America value individuality, and I don't think any of us have ever said we want to look American. We just look at what it is. So
Mhm.
that's really an education that you don't get everywhere. That we sit here in meetings or sit in watching a country develop, and I think it's fascinating. It's really fascinating to watch that system works for them. So what about the Japanese system? And so Sandi, do you think that the Japanese, is it changing a bit because people are venturing into other sports in Japan? When they used to have such huge numbers, how are things for them now with their numbers?
Well, the last I checked, they had about 18,000 members, so I don't think they're too hurting.
Right. But are they getting more, like, so as far as percentages, is the percentage of available athletes, is it still in their school system? Is still twirling predominant, or are they venturing into skating and gymnastics and other things like that?
Um, I'm not sure I can really answer that question. I don't think that twirling is actually in their school systems. I think it's offered in all the school systems as an after-school kind of program.
Okay.
So I guess in some ways it is, but it isn't like a class that they take when they're
Mhm.
at school.
Mhm.
I they're probably venturing off into some other things as well.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
they've always felt like I've always just sort of followed the American way of, the way they do things. So
So, Kathy, how do you feel about our growth as far as you've been in it a long time as a coach? What would you like to see from a sponsorship situation? What do you think an organization needs to do to help our athletes get sponsorship?
Lord only knows, because we've been trying to do this for however many years. It's just, I think, being at the right place in the right time and having the right contact, because I think it's luck more than anything. I don't think there's, it could be a water company. It could be any kind of corporate entity that all of a sudden decides they want to expand their brand. But until we have more exposure, it's hard for a sponsor to come on board.
yeah, because they don't even know what we are.
Pardon me?
They don't even know what we are.
Exactly. When NASCAR was really big, it was like people paid a bunch of money to be on the hood of the car, because they would count how many times the camera in a 500 lap race would pick up on that. And that was huge. So, we just don't have that same kind of entity.
Right.
I guess.
No, and I think that it's, a lot of it is just the recognition part has to happen first, so that they recognize us, and numbers are huge in that whole sponsorship game, believe me.
So what are the IBTF and the other mother organizations? How are they developing the grassroots so that then we eventually those kids can, the elite of the elite, wind up at these top championships? Is the IBTF concerned or dealing with grassroots programs in order to nurture that?
Well, not yet. We're just trying to get the top put together first.
And do you think there's a long-term plan for that?
Yeah, there will be, down the road. It's just, like I said, it's a long process. But yeah, well, of course it has to be, because that's the feeder program. That's where
Right.
kids come from.
Yeah. Kathy, do you remember the moment that flag came out in Canada with the IBTF representatives? What was your feeling?
Well, it was, the first World Championships were held in Seattle. So, I mean, that was monumental for us, the people who lived here, because we never even, we were fortunate to get nationals. And then all of a sudden we had the World Championships. And I'm pretty emotional. Like when we didn't win the World Cup in 1989, I cried, and it was, I just really buy into all of that. And it was very emotional, because you've seen it from the beginning and you've seen it progress. And, the thing that I think people need to know, and they don't know enough, is it all started in the United States. We developed twirling in the other countries, and most of them will admit to that. But back in the day, when we allowed the Japanese to compete in our national championships, you would see the Japanese people. They weren't even coaches, but yeah. And they were standing on the balcony level with their movie cameras, filming everything they could film. And if it weren't twirling in the United States, fueled twirling around the world. And I don't think the current generation of twirlers realizes how much the world is really was dependent on us for its growth. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Don't you remember they would come in and they'd ask for lessons and book lessons, and like you're out there working with them for 4 hours and you're like, would you like a break? No, continue. And I'm like, can I have a break?
Well, they were like sponges.
So hungry and so disciplined. And, Sandy and I were talking before we came on, and I know at our university, my fear is that it's going to take 4 years to rebuild the leadership, to rebuild the excellence and the leadership that we have in our university program for college marching band. And that's not anyone's deficit. That's not to anyone's fault. It's just that the lack of mentorship and the lack of commitment, and everyone's world has just been written on a whiteboard. and it can all change tomorrow. So why are we too invested when it could change tomorrow? So I think it's going to be up to the leadership to say, we need to do this. And I look at just turning 60 years old, and all of the people that were my mentors are still there doing it. So what happens and how many people are behind us to pick that up? To pick it up and make sure that the carriage of excellence and leadership carries on. So what's
That's one of my biggest concerns, and I talk about that all the time. And I try to encourage the young people to stay. We need you. We need them desperately.
yes, and
Because
you do say that, and it's still like encouragement is one thing, but moving it to action is tough. So Kathy, what's your feeling on the generations behind coming up?
Well, I think that back in the day when I decided I was going to quit teaching school and just teach twirling full time, there wasn't a lot available for women, for sure. And luckily I had a supporting husband who, didn't care if I didn't bring in my share, who was willing to have the health insurance. And it's a different society now. And women can have some pretty empowered jobs, and it keeps becoming, more and more available. So it's hard to get people involved in twirling because the hours are horrible. You teach when everyone else is done working. You almost always work on the weekends. So it's hard. It's just, and would I encourage people to have the kind of life and commitment that I did? Yes, but it has to be the right fit. Because if your partner isn't going to buy into it, then by all means, you can't do it.
Yeah.
But, I go to work every day and I love it. I can't say that there are some days when I might prefer not to go, but where do you have that many colleagues throughout the world that do the same thing and share your same passion? There aren't very many people that can say that.
No.
But it's hard for kids to experience that or understand it if they don't experience it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's going to be hard to make it happen because economics maybe are going to keep it from happening.
Well, let's bring it back a little bit, because some of us on this call, we probably all have our favorite places. So Colleen Murphy, I'm going to call on you. P.S. Congratulations on your marriage. And so you were at the last International Cup. What made that experience great?
Well, it was actually my very first International Cup. I grew up strictly MBTA. So it was my first time seeing the Japanese compete in person. And I'm a big YouTube fan, but seeing them in person was great. And I've experienced this before at WBTF World Championships, but I love the camaraderie between the Team USA cohort, I guess is the best way to say it. Because we were the new kids on the block. I still feel like the new kids on the block a little bit with my team at USTA stuff. So it was great. It was everything I had hoped it would be. So I love it. I miss it. I wish we were going again this year. I miss it. I'm running a business and trying to get kids there. So we can't wait until it's all back, and we're trying to give these kids everything they can to work towards, So.
Right. Jody, what was your favorite part about participating at an International Cup?
I think the thing that always stands out in my mind was like opening ceremonies, when you saw all the athletes on the floor and the arena was packed and everyone was engaged and cheering. And I just think that's like a surreal moment right there, as to, you know what you're going for and you know what it's all about, but then like that moment just hits home right there.
And isn't it, those are those moments I tell the kids, just wait. You've never seen the American flag like that, or your country's flag. So Marshall, have you been to an international championship?
I was many years ago, but like Colleen, I was strict NBTA growing up. So for those who don't know, I was NBTA until about 2002, and then I left, and I just came back 2 years ago and into USTA. So I'm seeing massive differences from what I left experiencing. I love the differences. And before I go any further, Sandy and Kathy, I don't know if you guys had a big part in this, but I've always wanted to compete in Super Extra as a man. That was always off limits. So thank you. No matter when it happens, I will be competing for it and living a dream. So
Well, you go for it, Marshall. You can do that now.
I know. So I have to give a big shout out to everyone that helped with that. But I went. That one was in England that year, and that was NBTA, and that was oddly enough, I was befriended at nationals that year by a group called Gemini, and they are out of They were out of England. They're no more.
Yes.
But that was the year they did My Heart Will Go On, and it was surreal to actually see it. I mean, to go and do anything international like that was absolutely amazing. And many people may not remember the name Marshall because that is my middle name. I was going by a different name back then. So yeah, I mean, to see it, surreal is the best way to put it. I'm excited with where this is going. I'm sitting back, and I'm now strictly USTA. I've come up against some of the NBTA people not wanting to even judge Super Extra for a man.
Times they are a changing, so there'll be some positive things.
Oh yeah. Oh, if you guys are having trouble, I'm sorry, but USTA has afforded that luxury. So I'm big in the history, and history's always been something. And I've noticed USTA celebrates the history, and something I teach everyone, because I also mentor outside of baton twirling, is that you 3 L's. You live in the past. You learn from the past, live in the present, look towards the future. 3 L's. And I'm gathering I really fit in very well with y'all.
Johnny, what about your kids' international experience? What has helped shape them about it?
You know, I think one of the biggest things with them that they always talk about is the interaction with the other countries and the kids. And they love being out there and the competing and doing the opening and closing ceremonies. But they really enjoyed the back scenes and in between and socializing with those others. And both kids have come away with so many friends. I mean, Harley daily talks to kids from Japan and Ireland, and they're like best friends. And I think that's something that's great for the kids to come away with.
That's what we can only hope for. Jen, what about your international experience? What's been wonderful about it if you've had it?
Hi. I'm hoping you can hear me okay because I've got two computers running. It's report card week. I've had the pleasure, I guess you could say, of being able to say that I was at the first International Cup. So I was a young mom at the time, and I took my baton club to the first International Cup because we heard it was just going to be this amazing opportunity, particularly because it was so hard to make the world team. So we're in the Toronto area. We've got the Buffalo Gals and Maureen Johnson. So to be the world team is really hard. And so the International Cup was just an opportunity to bring more kids to an international event. And so it was like being at the Olympics. Like, we just stood out there and went, this is awesome. And then I was able to do a few more in between. And then I was at the last one. And what was so special about that one is my daughter was 12, so she was able to compete that year, and she was on our B team. And so then to do it with her and march out, you know, as a country and see her running over to take a picture with the girl from Japan. And her name's Alexia. We call her Lexi, and she really looked up to Lexi Duda. So then we had to find Lexi Duda and have like a Lexi picture and all that stuff you guys are talking about. It breaks my heart a little bit, this COVID situation, because she was just at the point of breaking onto the scene. So we have a bit of a stall. So we have been Zooming like crazy and just praying that we can get out as soon as possible.
Yeah, yeah. So Kathy and Sandy, you're going to have different questions to finish up here. Favorite countries that you've been able to visit because of twirling. So I know that there's a big list, but if you could narrow it to 3. So Kathy, you first.
Probably Italy, France, Germany.
Really? Okay. And Sandy, favorite country you've been able to go to because of twirling?
Japan, Australia. And because of twirling, not necessarily for competition, would probably be Russia.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we could go on about a gazillion things with this because there's just such a fascinating history and such a promising future. And Sandy, I just want to thank you personally. I don't know that we always get the opportunity to say that. I know me personally, I'm grateful for your mentorship. I'm grateful for your encouragement. And not everyone knows, nor do they need to know, all of those hours behind the scenes and the emails that are flying at 4 a.m. And, for you to take an hour tonight to talk with us, I think it's important. And there are very few people in the world that can say they've had an impact on an entire activity in the way that several of the people in our sport have. But I know you've chosen to take it on the chin sometimes, and you've chosen to be really visible leader. And so I think that the future is very promising because of several people's commitment, but I know you've really been a spearhead in trying to make that happen. So
Thank you, Kyle, very much. And right back at you, and right back at Kathy Forsyth. We've been down a long road together over a number of years, and appreciate all my comrades here in this country who've really spent their life trying to make something good out of this.
oh my gosh, isn't it amazing? And whenever the future gets to happen, I know it's going to be pretty bright. So thank you all for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
I miss everyone. And now some people need to get on the next call. So
Thank you all.
Thank you,
All
everyone.
right.
Have a
You
great
bet.
night. Stay safe.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Night.